I never planned to write this down. I found the notes again on March 3, 2025, folded inside an old green notebook that still smelled like oil and damp fabric. The date on the first page was September 14, 2023, Eastern Ukraine, a thin tree line with no name worth remembering. Back then we joked it looked harmless, like something from a hunting trail back home. 15 minutes later, it wasn't a tree line anymore. It was a trap. The kind you don't see until you're already inside it. The first sound wasn't the explosion. It was the air tearing apart. A deep crack that hit your chest before your ears could react. Then the ground jumped. Dirt slapped my face, hot and sharp, and pine needles rained down like broken glass. The smell came fast. Burnt soil, wet wood, metal dust. Someone on my left yelled a name. Someone on my right was laughing for no reason at all. That nervous laugh soldiers get when their brain hasn't caught up yet. We had dug in shallow, thinking speed mattered more than comfort. That mistake sat heavy on us as the shells walked closer. Each hit stripped branches away, snapping them like dry bones. Radios turned useless. All I heard was static and breathing. My own breath sounded too loud inside my helmet. You stop thinking in sentences then. You think in fragments. Down. Wait. Don't move. Don't die here. When the shelling paused, that silence was worse. No birds. No wind. Just the ringing in your head and the click of safeties being pushed off somewhere ahead. I remember the trees smoking. Thin gray lines twisting upward. Someone whispered, "They're coming." It wasn't fear in his voice. It was certainty, like he was reading a clock. They moved fast, using the smoke, close enough that I could hear boots hitting roots. Grenades thumped into the trench mouths, not loud, just heavy, like doors slamming underground. The earth shook in short punches. I pressed my cheek into the mud and tasted iron. Every opening in that tree line felt like an eye watching us, waiting for someone to lift their head. That's when it hit me how fast ground can change meaning. 10 minutes earlier, those trees were cover, shade, a place to breathe. Now every trunk was a threat, every shadow a man with a rifle. That strip of land wasn't terrain anymore. It was a machine, and we were already inside it, learning too late how it worked. The barrage wasn't random. I didn't understand that on September 14, 2023, at least not while I was trying to keep my teeth from chattering. But later, when I talked to Captain Hritsenko after we got rotated out on September 18th, he said it straight. They're not just breaking dirt. They're breaking your timing. That's what it felt like inside that tree line. Like the clock in your head got smashed and all you had left was panic and guesswork. The shells landed in patterns, tight and mean, like someone drawing lines over our trenches. Every impact threw more than dirt. Splinters, bark, bits of metal that whistled past your ears. You could smell fresh pine like it had been cut, mixed with that bitter chemical stink from explosives. My buddy Artem kept counting seconds between blasts out loud, like that would give us control. 3, 2, 1, and then the next hit would come early just to prove him wrong. Our radios got drowned. Not just by static, by the actual violence of it. You'd press the mic and hear nothing, or you'd hear half a sentence from another position and then it would cut. Orders became rumors. Rumors turned into people moving at the wrong time. I watched one of our guys, Serhiy, 19 babyface, crawl toward a better firing slot, and the moment he moved, a round landed close enough to bury him up to the neck. He came up coughing dirt, eyes wide like he'd been reborn angry. The worst part was how it forced you to hide. The smarter you were, the deeper you shoved yourself into cover and the less you saw. That's what they wanted. Heads down, eyes off the approaches. You can't fight what you can't see, and you can't coordinate when you're just trying to survive the next 10 seconds. It turned us into separate little islands of fear, each man hugging his own patch of mud like it was a whole country. Somewhere behind us, a field commander kept trying to stitch it back together. Hold, hold, don't let them cut the line. His voice came through broken, like it was traveling through water. Then the mic went dead. After that, I stopped believing help was coming on time. Not because I was hopeless, because the battlefield had already told me what it was. A place where being on time can get you killed. And when the guns finally paused again, that second silence felt planned too, like bait. I remember the smoke hanging low, gray and dirty. And I remember thinking if I lift my head, if I look, I might catch one glimpse that saves us. But the moment you try to become brave in a place like that, the war punishes you for it. I didn't know it yet, but that pause was the hinge. The point where confusion becomes capture. They came in low and close, not shouting, not rushing like in the movies. It was methodical, professional, You could hear it in the rhythm. Boots stopping, moving again, metal touching metal. Grenades weren't thrown to kill first. They were thrown to make you move. A dull thump, dirt collapsing inward, pressure squeezing your chest. The kind of blast that doesn't end you, just forces you out of whatever hole you thought would keep you alive. I remember seeing hands before faces, gloves smeared with mud, fingers tight around rifles. A voice called distances in Russian. Calm, almost bored. 10 meters. 5. Clear. They weren't hunting bodies, they were clearing space. Meter by meter, like cleaning a room you plan to sleep in. That's when I realized this wasn't chaos for them. It was routine. We were running on leftovers. Ammo counted in our heads. Magazines passed like favors. I had 14 rounds left. I know because I wrote it later in that notebook like it mattered. My rifle smelled hot and oily, and my hands shook every time I reloaded. Not from fear exactly, but from fatigue. That deep, bone-level tiredness that makes you sloppy if you're not careful. That's how soldiers die quietly, by getting sloppy. Someone screamed down the line that they were hit. Not loud, just sharp. The kind of sound you make when you don't want to scare anyone else. The call went up the radio chain anyway. Man down. Need support. No one promised anything back. Silence again. That silence carried weight. It told us what was coming without saying it. We knew the pattern. Heavy fire. Close assault. Slow grind forward. I had heard older guys talk about it months earlier, saying the war had learned how to eat people efficiently. Standing there, pressed into collapsing earth, I finally understood what they meant. This wasn't about bravery or skill anymore. It was about time. How long before you ran dry? How long before someone reached your corner of the trench? That's when the word, vehicle, started floating between us like a prayer. Not shouted, whispered. If armor comes. It wasn't hope exactly. It was math. Ammo plus steel equals survival. And somewhere behind that smoking tree line, someone had to decide whether we were worth the risk. The decision came late, later than any of us wanted. I learned the date afterward. Still September 14th, just past 1620. At the time, all I knew was that the ground started to feel different under my boots, like the air itself was waiting. Then someone yelled, "Track noise." At first I didn't believe it. War plays tricks on you. You hear things you want to hear. But then there it was again. Heavy, rhythmic, metal moving with purpose. It was an M113. I recognized the sound before I saw it. A dull mechanical growl pushing through the smoke, branches cracking as it forced its way toward us. Relief hit fast and dangerous. You have to be careful with relief in combat. It makes you stupid. Guys started shifting, lifting heads, signaling like the worst was already behind us. I remember thinking, just get me ammo, get me out, I don't care how. The vehicle didn't make it. There was a sharp crack that didn't sound like artillery. It was flatter, closer. The front of the carrier lifted just enough for me to see daylight under it. Then it slammed sideways into a tree with a sound like a bone breaking. No fireball, just smoke and silence. That was the cruel part. It looked survivable. It looked fixable. But it wasn't going anywhere. The crew bailed fast. Training kicked in. They checked each other, weapons up, eyes scanning. I could smell burnt rubber and something acidic like batteries torn open. They ran for cover because they knew the rule. A stopped vehicle is an invitation. Somewhere above us, a drone was already adjusting its angle. You could feel it, even if you couldn't see it yet. When that M113 died, something else died with it. The plan, evac, resupply, rotation, all gone in one hit. I saw it on the faces around me. Not panic, understanding, the kind that sinks into your stomach and stays there. We weren't getting pulled out clean. If we moved, it would be on foot, slow, exposed. That's when small groups started slipping back through the trees using roots and fallen branches like lifelines. I remember crawling. My chest pressed so hard into the ground I could feel my heartbeat in the dirt. Above us, the drone finally showed itself, a faint buzzing, almost polite. Then coordinates went out. You don't hear them, but you feel the answer. Artillery doesn't ask questions. That retreat wasn't a retreat. It was a narrowing hallway. Trees ahead, mines behind, eyes in the sky. Every step felt borrowed. And that's when I realized the truth nobody likes to say out loud. Sometimes rescue doesn't fail because of courage or effort. Sometimes it fails because the battlefield has already closed the door. The drone stayed with us. Not loud, not aggressive, just there. a thin buzzing that drifted in and out like a mosquito you can't swat. Every time it faded, someone hoped it had lost us. Every time it came back, that hope died quietly. We moved in pairs, then singles, then stopped pretending there was any formation left. The ground was soft from the shelling, damp and uneven, and every branch snap sounded like a gunshot inside my head. At 16:47, one of the guys behind me went down. His name was Mikola, 32, father of one. He didn't scream. He just collapsed like his strings were cut. Shrapnel had torn into his leg, high and ugly. Blood soaked into the leaves fast, dark and thick. We dragged him behind a fallen trunk, breathing hard, hands slick and shaking. The smell of iron was so strong it drowned out everything else. The radio call went out anyway. Calm words, tight voice. One wounded, cannot move. Everyone listening knew what that meant. A stretcher here would be suicide. Mines below, drone above, artillery waiting. You could hear it in the silence after the call. No argument, no denial, just acceptance. Mikola grabbed my sleeve and said, "Don't stay." Not begging, ordering. That stayed with me longer than the sound of the explosions. The shells came in fast after that. Precise. Walking the narrow path we had just crawled through. Dirt and wood shredded the air, snapping branches overhead. We pressed flat, faces in mud, letting the earth decide who it wanted. I remember thinking how quiet fear becomes when it's real. No shouting, no prayers, just breathing and waiting. By then, we were boxed in. Trees in front where they had already taken ground. Mines behind where the M113 had died. Sky owned by someone else. That's what a kill zone feels like. Not dramatic, not sudden. It tightens around you, inch by inch, until even staying still feels like a mistake. Modern war doesn't rush you. It convinces you there's no good move left. That was when the sound changed again. Deeper than the M113. Sharper. Confident. A different engine. A different weight pressing into the earth. Someone muttered a single word, barely audible through clenched teeth. Bradley. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was something colder. A last calculation. Steel, firepower, or nothing. The Bradley didn't rush in like a hero. It waited. That told me everything about the crew inside. At around 17:05, Ukrainian guns opened up first, hammering the edge of the tree line with short, violent bursts. The ground jumped again, but this time it wasn't meant for us. It was meant to push heads down, break aim, buy seconds. You learn fast that seconds are currency out there. Smoke followed. Thick, white-gray, rolling low and dirty, burning your eyes and throat. The Bradley moved under it, heavy and steady, like it owned the ground it touched. I finally saw it through the haze. Dark shape, angular, confident. The sound of its 25mm cannon came in short bursts, controlled, angry. Each burst ripped into the trees ahead, chewing bark, tearing into shadows where men had been hiding minutes earlier. That fire changed everything. The pressure eased. Not because the enemy vanished, but because they had to think again. And thinking takes time. Over the radio, a clear voice cut through for the first time in hours. "Move now. Fall back to the pickup." No panic. No shouting. Just order. We moved in short sprints, dragging gear, lifting wounded, slipping in mud that smelled like smoke and blood. When the Bradley reached the trench edge, it angled itself just right, hull between us and the woods. The ramp dropped fast. Metal on metal. That sound was louder than any shell. Guys piled in, pushing, pulling, counting heads without saying numbers. I remember grabbing the edge of the ramp and feeling how cold the steel was even after all that firing. Cold and solid. Real. The moment the last man cleared, the ramp came up and the driver reversed hard. The cannon kept firing as we backed out, bursts cracking over our heads, keeping the tree line honest. Inside it was dark, cramped, loud. Someone laughed. Someone else started shaking and couldn't stop. I just sat there, helmet between my knees, trying to understand that I was still breathing. Later, people would talk about that Bradley like it was a machine that saved lives. They're not wrong. But sitting there, covered in mud and someone else's blood, it didn't feel heroic. It felt practical, like a moving wall that bought us one more chance. In war, that's the closest thing to mercy you ever get. We thought it was over once the ramp closed and the Bradley pulled us back. That's what civilians think. That rescue is the end of the story. It wasn't. It was just the end of one problem and the beginning of another. On September 15th, just after dawn, the same tree line sat there again, quiet, scarred. pretending nothing had happened. Mud still smoked in places. Broken branches hung like snapped bones, and we were told we were going back. This time the air smelled different. Less fresh earth, more old smoke and cold metal. Sleep hadn't done much for us. No one talked about Makola. No one asked how many rounds anyone had left. The briefing was short and blunt. They're digging in. If we let them settle, we pay later. That's how ground works in war. If you give it time, it charges interest. The Bradleys lined up like they meant business. Not one, several. Engines low, crews quiet. Artillery started first again, but smarter now. Blocking fire, not destruction. You could feel the intention behind it. Shells landing where movement might happen, not where men already were. Smoke followed, thick and deliberate, blinding drones that had hunted us the day before. For the first time, it felt like we were shaping the fight instead of reacting to it. When the ramps dropped, we moved fast. No hesitation, no speeches. Boots hit the ground and we ran straight at the trenches we'd memorized in the dark the night before. Grenades went in first. Always. The blasts were close enough to punch the air out of your lungs. Then we jumped in. Mud up to the ankles. Narrow walls. That familiar, awful closeness where everything smells like sweat, earth, and fear. Above us, drones worked like silent partners. Every muzzle flash was a death sentence. A Russian rifle cracked somewhere to my right, and seconds later a strike came down on that exact spot. No debate. No delay. The trench became a place where hiding didn't mean safety anymore. You either moved with your team or you got pinned and erased. That's when I understood something that doesn't show up on maps or footage. Modern war isn't about overwhelming force all at once. It's about pressure that never lets go. Steel in front of you, eyes in the sky, fire behind you. By the time the last pocket started collapsing in that tree line, you could feel it. Not victory, not relief, but the moment when the enemy realizes the ground has turned against them. And once that happens, the fight is already decided. By late morning on September 15th, the fight had changed its tone. Not louder, tighter, the kind of quiet that means people are running out of options. Inside the trenches, the air was stale and heavy, packed with dust and the sour smell of old explosives. You could hear breathing around corners before you saw faces, boots slipping, gear scraping wood. Every sound felt too close. Some of them tried to run. You could tell who. The ones who broke contact without covering fire, who popped up where the trench thinned and made for the trees. Instinct over orders, fear over structure. A few made it 20, maybe 30 meters before drones caught the movement. You never saw the strike coming, just the sudden absence of sound where a man had been. Others stayed. Those were the dangerous ones, backed into short trench sections, rifles steady, eyes locked forward. Not brave, not stupid, just out of exits. When they fired, they gave themselves away. When they stayed silent, drones found them anyway. The trench stopped being protection and started feeling like a coffin you could still walk inside. I remember one moment clearly. A Russian soldier stepped out slowly, hands up, rifle dropped behind him. Mud on his face. Eyes red, not crying. Burned from smoke and sleep. He didn't look at us. He looked at the ground, like it had betrayed him. We moved in careful, checked him, pulled him back. No shouting, no insults, just procedure. War strips things down to that. More followed. Small groups, singles, some shaking, some calm. A few still angry, jaws tight, like surrender was another kind of wound. We loaded them onto the same Bradley that had pulled us out the day before. The irony didn't escape anyone, but no one commented. You don't joke much when the adrenaline finally starts to drain. By the time firing slowed, the tree line was ours again. Same strip of ground, same mud, different cost. On a map it wouldn't mean much, but standing there smelling smoke and crushed leaves, it felt heavy. Like the land remembered who had been there and what it had taken. That's the thing about these fights. They don't end with celebration. They end with inventory. Of weapons, of people, of things you won't talk about when you go home. And as we secured the last trench section, I understood something simple and ugly. In this war, ground doesn't care who owns it. It only cares how many times you're willing to bleed for it. By the afternoon of September 15th, the fighting had thinned out enough that time started creeping back in. Not normal time. Combat time still ruled. But the kind where you notice your hands shaking when you light a cigarette, or how your ears keep ringing even when nothing is firing. The tree line looked smaller now, stripped, chewed. What had felt endless the day before was just a few hundred meters of ruined ground. We walked it slowly, clearing again. Not because we expected resistance, but because the war teaches you not to trust quiet. Every trench bend got checked. Every dugout got a grenade tossed in before a head went down. The smell was layered. Burnt wood, old smoke, human sweat trapped in damp earth. In some places the soil was so churned it felt soft, like stepping on something alive. That's when the meaning of it all started to settle. Not in speeches or debriefs, but in small thoughts you didn't ask for. This strip of trees protected a road. That road fed guns. Those guns shaped a sector. Lose this ground, and the pressure shifts somewhere else. Onto people you might know. Hold it, and someone else gets a night to breathe. That's how small places grow teeth in war. We found the wreck of the M113 again, half hidden by smoke stains and broken branches. It looked smaller too. Sad, almost. I ran my hand along the torn metal, still warm in places where the sun hit it. That vehicle hadn't failed us. It had done exactly what the math of the battlefield allowed. Minds don't care about intentions. Later, when command talked about the engagement, they used words like localized action and limited objective. I understood why. On a map, it was nothing. A smudge. But maps don't smell what we smelled or hear what we heard. Maps don't remember voices on broken radios or the sound of a ramp slamming shut while rounds hit steel inches away. That night, as we rotated out, I looked back once at the tree line. No emotion. Just recognition. We'd taken it, lost it, taken it again. Tomorrow it could happen somewhere else. Same pattern, different names. That's how this war breathes. People ask later what moments change you. They expect explosions or close calls. For me, it was realizing how ordinary it all felt once it was done. Not meaningless, just routine. And that's the part that stays with you. Not the fear, not the noise. The quiet understanding that this kind of fight will keep happening, tree line by tree line, as long as someone believes the ground is worth the cost. I'm writing this last part months later, far from that tree line, but the date still comes back clear. September 15th, 2023, 2140. We were finally out, boots off, sitting on ammo crates behind a broken building that smelled like mold and diesel. No one spoke much. Phones stayed in pockets. You don't rush back to normal after something like that. You just sit and let the noise drain out of you. Command later said the position was secured, under control. That phrase always sounds clean. What it really meant was that the road behind those trees stayed open. The guns nearby kept firing, and another unit didn't have to walk into the same trap the next day. Control isn't ownership. It's delay. It's buying time with people instead of money. I thought about the Russians we loaded onto the Bradley, about how close they were to us in the end. Same mud on their boots, same exhaustion in their faces, different orders, different flags. The ground didn't care. It never does. It just absorbs whatever falls on it and waits for the next set of boots. When people watch clips of battles like this, they look for lessons, for turning points, for heroes. What I remember is simpler. The sound of steel covering flesh, the smell of smoke trapped in wet leaves, the weight of a rifle when your arms don't want to lift it anymore. The moment you realize survival isn't dramatic, it's procedural. That narrow strip of trees will never have a name most people recognize. It won't be in books, but it shaped a sector, maybe a week, maybe more. And somewhere down the line, that matters. Wars aren't decided only by capitals or offensives. They're decided in places like that, where a few dozen soldiers find out whether their side can still adapt faster than the ground can kill them. I keep the notebook closed most days, but when I open it, that smell is still there. Oil, paper, damp earth. It reminds me that what we lived wasn't a story meant to impress anyone. It was a record, proof that we were there, that the fight was real, and that for a few hard hours in eastern Ukraine, a thin line of trees decided who went home and who didn't. This wasn't the worst day. Subscribe if you want to hear the ones that don't get written down.